Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Melanin Margin, the weekly chat show where conversations about race are never off the table. We're your hosts, Quaviondre Williams.
And Daquon Wilson.
So let's get into this week's conversation. What's hot on the table this week? The New York Times recently came under heat after tennis superstar Serena Williams called them out for erroneously using a photo of her sister Venus. The printed article, which covered Williams's new venture fund, Serena Ventures, highlighted a picture of Venus Williams, while the text noted it was Serena Williams. Serena. Williams took to Twitter to respond, tweeting, "No matter how far we've come, we get reminded that it's not enough. This is why I raised 11 million for Serena Ventures to support the founders who are overlooked by ingrained systems, woefully unaware of their biases. Because even I am overlooked. You can do better at New York Times." The New York Times responded to the tweet saying, "This was our mistake. It was due to an error when selecting photos for the print edition, and it did not appear online, and a correction will appear in tomorrow's paper." Some Twitter users claim that this error reflects a larger issue, such as one user who tweeted an error that was missed by how many eyes on the way to final print and before distribution? From journalists to distribution, how many Black people had a hand in producing this piece? My guess, 0. There lies your problem. While others believe it was just an honest mistake. So, Daquon, I want to ask you, do you think that this was an error of the New York Times, or is it a representative of a larger problem?
¿Cómo se dice por qué no los dos?
Ugh.
Because I think, here's the thing. I always get frustrated during these types of conversations where people are just like, it's not about race. It's just an issue. It's just an error that happened. People make mistakes, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, even if that is true, that does not mean that we still can't take that issue and then see what kind of underpinnings are under it, see what our systems are like to make sure that it is not about race indeed. Because if you think about like your physical body, if you had chest pain and you went to the doctor and you said you have this terrible chest pain and they examined you and it was like, oh, well, like you don't have a heart issue, you wouldn't just be like, all right, I'm done and move on. You'd be like, so what is the issue? Because I'm experiencing pain. So if there's an error in a system, even if it's not about race, I still think that race can be part of the conversation to really question, okay, why did this issue happen? And what can we do to prevent this issue in the future? And like that is what I was missing from the New York Times response. Like there was no just like, you know what, Serena, we are sorry. We
We fucked
doing
up.
everything we can to like make sure this doesn't happen again. They're like literally like, oh, an error happened. And it's like, no shit, Sherlock. Like we know that an error happened, but why did it happen? And what are you doing to make sure it doesn't happen again? And why aren't you saying anything to Serena directly? Like, I'm sure we've talked about this multiple times, but if you're going to have an apology, address directly.
Yeah, I fully agree, Daquan. While there is no way to tell whether, this was truly an honest mistake or not, it doesn't matter in the slightest to me. The
Right.
New York Times is worth over $1.78 billion as of 2019. Y'all have way too fucking much money to be making these kind of mistakes. I mean, had this been a smaller publication, maybe I would have had more leniency. But the New York fucking Times, bitch, I think the fuck not. Like, as the
I think
Twitter
not.
user pointed out, this passed the eyes of how many people before distribution? No, ma'am. Like, as far as this being representative of a larger problem, though, I think it does open up the dialogue of a long-standing issue of microaggressions against Black people in the workplace.
Hmm.
Time and time again, Black people have been confused for each other by their white colleagues and managers several times throughout their tenure with whatever company they're working for, right? Now, I'm going to say this. Of course, people have doppelgangers. We know this. And yes, all races get confused for other people too. We fucking know that. So calm down before you tell us about how Mary Sue and Betty Ann are always told that they favor each other. It's so
Not
annoying.
Mary
It's not
Sue and
about
Betty
race.
Ann.
I'm serious, bitch. We're not talking about that. Okay. We know that that shit happens. We're not saying that. But the reality is, a Black person being confused for another Black person by a white person who does it so often and so nonchalantly has roots deep in slavery. So it holds an entirely different weight to it. I mean, when African slaves were stolen from their lands and sold into chattel slavery, one of the things that the white captors would do is shave their heads and separate the tribes. This was all done in an effort to erase and strip any form of identity and individualism from the slaves. By making them all appear the same, this was subliminally sending the slaves a dark message, which was that if a slave stepped out of line, the white slave masters would have no problem with killing them because they could easily replace them to have another slave do the same job. So if they want to live, they better do as they're told or face the consequences. Now, while this may not be the intention of all white people when they mistake the identities of their Black coworkers, it doesn't at all lessen the implication or the history behind such a mistake, especially when it happens in repetition with no real effort to correct or an apology for it. I mean, white bosses mistaking the identities of their Black subordinates subconsciously reinforces the idea that their contributions to whatever company or business is not integral enough to differentiate them, which demeans the amount of work and effort they put in. And if they got fired or they left there tomorrow, it wouldn't have any significance or impact on the company whatsoever. They're telling them that they're unimportant and easily replaceable. So it's like you have to understand the deeper impacts of this kind of rhetoric. And now, don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting here saying that this is what the New York Times was doing. Again, this is not what all white people are doing, but this is the reason why critical race theory needs to be taught. Because so much of this racism isn't just the overt, Klan members or Proud Boys. It's microaggressions that are so ingrained in our society that they happen subconsciously or unintentionally. Teaching our kids about race at a young age opens their eyes to be better people and learn how to create a more inclusive future for the next generation. Maybe if more children are aware of race and microaggressions, mistakes like this wouldn't happen nearly as often as they do. I mean, what do you think, Daquon? Like, what message do you think that this is to Black people when their identities get confused so carelessly by white people?
I think especially in this case, the message is success does not negate Blackness. Because in this situation, you have Serena Williams, who is a tennis superstar, more than a tennis, like she has her own venture firm now, and like she is such a successful person, and yet things like this still happen to her. Or like, I don't know if you heard, but Ryan Coogler tried to withdraw money from his own bank account and he got the police called on him. And so there are so many situations where like this, where it's like, no matter how high you get as a Black person, you're still a Black person. Your success does not negate that or whitewash you in any type of way. And so it sends a message that really just resonates that Black people are not as notable or noticeable
Exactly.
than other type of people. I was reading the actual like publication, and the title of it, the headline was just like tennis star starts venture firm or something like that. And it's like Serena Williams is a big enough name that her name could be in the headline.
Bitch,
Like it
put some
should not
respect on her
just
name.
be
Yeah.
exactly. It should not just read tennis star, because Serena Williams is more than just a tennis star.
Yeah. Tennis superstar. The fuck? Yeah. Like,
Exactly.
to me, it's really crazy that, like, we talked about this before on the podcast when we talked about the Sha'Carri Richardson situation, or specifically Simone Biles. where like Black accomplishments are so undermined by white society.
Right.
And it is such a massive problem that people are still not understanding. Like, you know, I just still can't get past Serena, like Simone Biles creating a whole move, and only for them to say, "Oh yeah, girl, that's too hard for regular people to do. We can't. That's too much. It's right. It's just we're not gonna rate it the way it should be rated. We're gonna just take back a whole bunch of that." And so, like you said, just simply saying tennis star. Who the fuck?
That could be
Who the fuck?
anybody. I'm sure if it, I'm just saying, I feel like if it was a white tennis star, a name would have been dropped in that headline, but that's just me.
Exactly. So I think that we need to really pay attention to that kind of stuff. I think people really need to stop undermining Black success, stop undermining our contributions to society, stop acting as if we haven't done our work. We haven't done honestly the impossible. It feels like with how many systems are against us, we have still succeeded and still elevated ourselves. Beyonce's, Oprah's, Tyler Perry. But you know. I gotta give
You
it to
ain't had to
him.
go there. You ain't had to go there.
But you know what I'm saying? Like we have persevered against a society that tells us that we do not matter, that our lives don't matter, that our success doesn't matter, and we have still made ourselves household names. We have people know us. Little Nas X is a household name. People know about him. You know, Billy Porter and like the people like that. We're just RuPaul. Like, you know, we are steady showing the world that regardless of what, you know, white society views us as, we will not be silenced. We will not be ignored. And I just think that people need to start recognizing that this is a real issue in our society. This is a real issue, and not just with Black people, but with people of color too. You know, the diminishing of their success is a problem that we need to stop, and we need to grow as a society and realize, baby, white people didn't do everything. And they are the only ones who deserve to be getting their flowers. Okay, the fuck. I mean, and honestly, even with this show, like, you know, Daquon and I do a Black History segment every episode, and every time my mind is blown by some of the shit that I've never ever would have guessed was a thing. The stuff that we have accomplished as Black people, bitch, we magic.
Period.